The mansion is burning again. Jane can see him through the flames, Reese, motionless on the floor, his chest barely rising. Above him hovers something that shouldn't exist, a woman with long black hair and a grin stretched impossibly wide, her bony fingers trailing across his pale face like a lover's caress. The heat is suffocating, the smoke choking, but Jane pushes forward anyway, her heart hammering against her ribs. This is her fault. She made the wish. She asked the magician to give the ghost closure, and now the ghost is taking what it wants most. Reese's life. Stop, Jane screams, but her voice is swallowed by the roar of the fire. The ghost turns its head, slowly, unnaturally, and its vacant eyes lock onto hers. Then it smiles wider, impossibly wider, and Jane realizes with cold, gut-wrenching certainty. The ghost doesn't want closure. It wants revenge. And Jane has just sealed the fate of the only man she's ever loved. Welcome back to the channel, my dear friends. Before we dive deeper into the story, kindly click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments which country you are watching from. Your support helps me bring you more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's get into the story. 3 weeks earlier, Jane had no idea what she was walking into. She stood at the edge of the forest, staring up at the massive iron gates that loomed before her like the entrance to another world. Beyond them, barely visible through the thick November mist, was Hawthorne Hall, a sprawling Gothic mansion with blackened stone walls and a crumbling west wing that looked like it had been touched by fire and never healed. Jane's fingers tightened around the straps of her backpack. She'd walked 3 hours through these woods to get here, and her legs ached. Her clothes were damp with sweat and mist, and her last bit of food was gone. But she couldn't turn back now. Her Uncle Bill lived here. He was her only family left. The taxi drivers in town had refused to bring her. "That place is cursed," one had said, his eyes wide with genuine fear. "Surrounded by haunted woods. The ones who go there never come back." Jane had laughed it off then. She'd heard warnings like that her whole life, about ghosts, about things that lurked in shadows, about places where the dead refused to rest. But Jane knew the truth. The dead were everywhere. She'd seen them since she was a child, at street corners, in reflections, standing in the doorways of the orphanage where she'd grown up, watching her with their empty, unblinking eyes. She'd learned early on not to talk about them. People thought she was crazy. They always had. But the ghosts were real. And they were lonely, just like her. Jane pushed open the gate. It groaned on rusty hinges, the sound echoing through the forest like a warning. She stepped through, her boots squelching in the mud, and started down the long, winding path toward the mansion. The air grew colder the closer she got. The mist thickened, curling around her ankles like living things. She could feel eyes on her, dozens of them, but when she turned to look, there was nothing but trees and shadow. Then she heard it, a low, rumbling growl. Jane froze. Her breath misted in the air. Slowly she turned. 2 golden eyes stared at her from the underbrush. A wolf. No, a wolf pup, small and scraggly, its fur matted with mud. It watched her with an intensity that seemed almost human, its head tilted, curious. Jane exhaled slowly. "Hey there," she whispered, crouching down and extending her hand. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The pup sniffed the air. Then, to her surprise, it stepped forward, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. It nudged her hand with its cold, wet nose, and Jane couldn't help but smile. "You're a brave little thing, aren't you?" The pup wagged its tail. Then, without warning, it grabbed her backpack in its teeth and bolted. "Hey!" Jane shouted, scrambling to her feet. "Come back here." But the pup was already gone, disappearing into the mist with her only belongings. Jane cursed under her breath and took off after it, stumbling through the mud and fog. She could hear the pup ahead of her, panting and paws thumping against the ground, dragging her bag along like a prize. "I don't even have any food left," she called out uselessly. "What do you want with it?" The pup didn't answer. Of course it didn't. Jane pushed through the underbrush, branches clawing at her coat, and then suddenly, the trees opened up. She stopped. Before her stood a small cabin, nestled at the edge of the woods. Smoke curled from its chimney, warm and inviting. And standing on the porch, illuminated by a single flickering lantern, was a man. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face weathered and stern, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Jane. The wolf pup sat at his feet, tail wagging, her backpack abandoned by the door. "The heck are you?" the man growled. Jane opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, the man's gaze shifted to the pup. His jaw clenched. "Did he bite you?" "What?" "No. Save it," the man snapped, cutting her off. He stepped aside, holding the door open. "You'd better come inside." Jane hesitated. She didn't know this man. But the rain was starting to fall now, cold and heavy, and she could see the warmth of the fire inside. "I'm looking for someone," she said carefully. "A relative. I've been told he lives here. His name is Bill." "I'm Bill," the man interrupted. Then his expression softened, just slightly. "Come on inside, Jane." She blinked. "How did you know my name?" Bill didn't answer. He just stepped back into the cabin, leaving the door open behind him. Jane glanced at the pup, who was watching her with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped inside. The warmth hit her immediately, along with the smell of burning wood and something sweet, melted chocolate. Bill was already at the stove, stirring a pot. "Sit," he said gruffly, nodding toward a chair by the fire. Jane obeyed, sinking into the worn cushions. The pup followed her inside, settling at her feet with a low, contented rumble. Bill poured her a cup of hot cocoa and set it on the table. Jane wrapped her hands around it, grateful for the warmth. "You look like your mother," Bill said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "I only met her once or twice, but I remember." Jane's chest tightened. "You never answered my letters." "I should have," Bill admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I'm sorry." For a moment, they sat in silence. Then Bill spoke again, his tone firmer now. "You can't stay here, Jane." Her heart sank. "I wasn't expecting you to." "My master won't allow it," Bill continued, his jaw tight. "This isn't my home. I work here, and he won't want a stranger around." "Your master?" Jane frowned. "You mean your boss?" Bill nodded, his eyes flicking briefly to the pup. "Drink up. It'll grow cold fast." Jane took a sip. The cocoa was rich and warm, with a hint of spice that made her feel instantly drowsy. She blinked, trying to focus, but her eyelids were growing heavy. "How do you know this wolf?" she asked, stifling a yawn. Bill didn't answer. He just watched her with a strange, sad expression. Jane tried to fight it, but the warmth of the fire and the cocoa were too much. Her head lolled back against the chair, and the world faded to black. The last thing she heard was a loud banging on the door. Then nothing. When Jane woke, the fire had burned low, and her head was pounding. She blinked against the dim light, disoriented. Bill was pacing near the window, his expression tight with worry. The wolf pup was gone. "What happened?" Jane mumbled, her tongue thick in her mouth. Bill turned sharply. "You need to leave. Now." Before Jane could respond, the door burst open. A man filled the doorway, tall, broad, and radiating an authority that made the air itself feel heavy. His dark blonde hair was disheveled, his jaw sharp and clenched, and his eyes. God, his eyes were the most striking shade of blue Jane had ever seen. They swept over her with an intensity that made her breath catch. But there was something wrong. Behind him, barely visible in the flickering candlelight, stood a woman. Her neck was bent at an unnatural angle, her long black hair falling like a curtain over half her face. And she was smiling, a wide, frozen smile that didn't reach her vacant eyes. Her bony fingers rested on the man's shoulder. Jane's stomach lurched. A ghost. She'd seen hundreds of them, but never one so present. So solid. "What are you doing here?" the man demanded, his voice like gravel. Jane's mouth went dry. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the ghost, whose smile seemed to stretch wider as it leaned closer to him, whispering something Jane couldn't hear. "Sir." Jane tried to warn him, but the words stuck in her throat. "I asked you a question," he growled, stepping forward. The ghost's fingers tightened on his shoulder. The man's expression darkened, his jaw twitching as though fighting against something inside him. I found a boy," Jane stammered, forcing herself to look at the man instead of the ghost. "Outside. He was naked, freezing. I thought." "Where is he?" the man snapped. Bill stepped forward. "He's fine, Alpha. He's in the back room." "Alpha?" Jane's confusion deepened, but she didn't have time to question it. The man, Alpha, apparently, strode past her without another glance, his presence leaving a cold void in its wake. The ghost followed, its smile never faltering. Jane's hands trembled as she looked at Bill. What just happened? Bill wouldn't meet her eyes. "You need to go, Jane, before the snow gets worse." "But the boy." "He's safe," Bill said firmly. "The Alpha will take care of him. But you can't stay here." Jane wanted to argue, but the look on Bill's face stopped her. He was afraid. Of what? An hour later, Jane was trudging through the forest again, Uncle Bill's vague directions echoing in her mind. The snow had started falling, thick, heavy flakes that blurred her vision and clung to her coat. She'd barely made it half a mile before she realized she was lost. The bus stop Bill had mentioned was nowhere to be found. The forest stretched endlessly around her, dark and suffocating. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps. And then the cold began to feel warm. Jane frowned, slowing her steps. Her fingers, which had been numb moments ago, now tingled with heat. Her chest felt tight, her head light. This was wrong. She knew it was wrong, but it felt so good. She stumbled, her knees buckling. The snow rose up to meet her, soft and inviting. She sank into it, her limbs heavy, her thoughts drifting. Maybe she'd just rest here for a moment. Just a moment. Her eyelids fluttered closed. Then she heard it, a voice, distant but commanding. "Jane!" She forced her eyes open. Through the swirling snow, she saw him. The Alpha. He was running toward her, his coat billowing behind him, his face etched with something that looked almost like fear. "Stay with me," he commanded, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands, strong, warm, cupped her face. "Jane, stay with me." She tried to respond, but her lips wouldn't move. He cursed under his breath and scooped her into his arms as though she weighed nothing. Jane felt herself being lifted, pressed against his chest, and the warmth of him was overwhelming. "You're safe," he murmured, his voice softer now. "I've got you." Jane's consciousness slipped away again, but this time, she wasn't afraid. She woke to firelight and the smell of pine. Her body ached, but she was warm, wrapped in thick furs and quilts. She blinked, taking in her surroundings. The room was rustic and grand, with high wooden ceilings and a crackling hearth. Where was she? A sound drew her attention. Soft giggles, barely audible. Jane sat up slowly, her head swimming. At the foot of the bed, two small heads peeked over the edge of the mattress. A boy and a girl, both blonde, both staring at her with wide, curious eyes. "You woke her up," the boy hissed. "Did not," the girl whispered back. Jane smiled despite herself. "Hi." Both children froze, then scrambled to their feet. The boy stepped in front of his sister protectively, his small jaw set. "You're not supposed to be here." "I know," Jane said gently. "I'm sorry." The girl peeked around her brother, her eyes bright. "Can you bake cookies?" The boy groaned. "Sophie." "I do have a great recipe," Jane said, her smile widening. Sophie's face lit up, but before she could respond, the door creaked open. Bill stepped inside, relief flooding his weathered face.
"Jane."
"Thank God you're awake." Behind him, the Alpha appeared, tall, imposing, and impossibly handsome in the firelight. His blue eyes met hers, and for a moment, Jane forgot how to breathe. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice low. I'm fine," Jane managed. "Thank you for saving me." His jaw tightened, and he looked away. "You almost died because I sent you out there. Don't thank me." There was something raw in his voice, guilt, maybe.
Or pain.
Jane wanted to say something, anything, but Bill cleared his throat. "The storm's gotten worse," Bill said. "The roads are blocked. Could be days before it clears. Maybe weeks." Jane's heart sank. "Weeks?" The Alpha's gaze returned to her, his expression unreadable. "You'll stay here until it's safe to leave. Bill will see to your needs." Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Jane stared after him, her chest tight with a strange, unfamiliar ache. Sophie tugged on her sleeve. "Are you going to stay with us?" Jane looked down at the little girl's hopeful face and felt something inside her shift. "I guess I am," she whispered. But as she glanced toward the door where the Alpha had disappeared, she couldn't shake the image of the ghost, its bony fingers, its unnatural smile, its whispered words that only he could hear. Something was very, very wrong in this house, and Jane had a terrible feeling she was the only one who could see it. Chapter 3. The Ghost's Grip. The days blurred together in a strange, dreamlike rhythm. Jane settled into her role as the children's nanny, and to her surprise, she loved it. Sophie was a whirlwind of energy and laughter, constantly chattering about mermaids and magic. Marcus was quieter, more guarded, but Jane could see the loneliness in his eyes, the same loneliness she'd carried her whole life. They needed her, and God, she needed them too. But Reese, the Alpha, as everyone called him, remained a ghost himself. He disappeared for days at a time, returning only briefly before vanishing again. When he was home, he was distant, his face pale and drawn, his movements slow as though he were carrying an invisible weight. And Jane knew why. The ghost was always there. Always. Hovering behind him, whispering in his ear, her bony fingers trailing across his shoulders. Jane would catch glimpses of her in mirrors, in shadows, in the corner of Reese's bedroom when she passed by at night. Eliza, his dead wife. Jane learned her name from Bill one afternoon while they worked in the garden. "She died in a fire," Bill had said quietly, his voice thick with old grief. "The West Wing. Reese tried to save her, but he couldn't reach her in time. He's never forgiven himself." Jane's chest tightened. He loved her very much. More than anything, Bill confirmed. They were everything to each other. Her death broke something in him. Jane looked toward the mansion, where Reese's silhouette moved past a window. The ghost moved with him, inseparable. What if? Jane hesitated. What if she's still here? Bill gave her a strange look. What do you mean? Jane bit her lip. She'd promised herself she wouldn't talk about the ghosts anymore. But this was different. This mattered. Never mind, she said softly. That night, Jane couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Reese, about the hollow look in his eyes, the way his hands trembled when the ghost was near, the way his voice would turn cold and harsh as though he wasn't himself anymore. She had to do something. Jane slipped out of bed and crept down the hall toward the library. If there was any information about ghosts, about how to help them move on, it would be there. The library was enormous, its shelves stretching to the ceiling. Jane ran her fingers along the spines until she found it, occult practices and spectral beings. Her heart raced as she flipped through the pages. Ghosts are spirits tied to the living by unresolved business, she read, often attached to a place or a person. To help a ghost move on, their old wounds must be healed. Jane's throat tightened.
How could she heal a wound like that?
How could she give Eliza what she needed when the woman had died in fire and tragedy? She kept reading, searching for answers, until her eyes landed on a passage about protection circles. If she couldn't free Eliza, maybe she could at least protect Reese from her. Jane tore out the page and hurried back to her room, her mind racing with plans. The next morning, Reese returned. Jane was in the kitchen with the children, flour dusting her hands as they shaped cookies, when she heard his voice in the hallway. Her heart leapt. Dad, Sophie squealed, abandoning her dough to race toward him. Marcus followed more slowly, his expression carefully neutral. Jane wiped her hands on her apron and stepped into the hallway. Reese was crouched down, hugging Sophie, his face softening in a way Jane had never seen before. Behind him, the ghost loomed, its smile wide and terrible. Their eyes met over Sophie's head. For a moment, something passed between them, recognition maybe, or longing. Then Reese stood abruptly, his expression shuddering. Miss Hartley. Mr. Hawthorne, Jane replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I trust the children are behaving. They're wonderful, Jane said quickly. They've been teaching me about the forest, and we've been baking, and Marcus is learning to read. Good. Reese interrupted, his tone clipped. He turned away. Carry on. Jane's chest ached as she watched him walk away, the ghost's fingers tightening possessively on his shoulder. Not for long, Jane thought fiercely. That night, Jane waited until the house was silent. Then she crept toward Reese's bedroom, chalk in hand, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had to try. She had to protect him. But when she pushed open his door, she froze. Reese was lying in bed, his body rigid, his skin deathly pale. And hovering above him, pressed against his lips in a grotesque mockery of a kiss, was the ghost. No! Jane gasped, rushing forward. She grabbed the salt shaker from her pocket, something she'd read about, a desperate measure, and threw it over her shoulder toward the ghost. The effect was immediate. The ghost shrieked, a sound like nails on glass, and vanished. Reese's body went limp. His eyes fluttered open, confused and dazed. Jane, he rasped. You're okay. Jane breathed, dropping to her knees beside him. Her hands found his face, his pulse, checking for signs of life. You're okay. His hand caught hers, warm despite everything. What are you doing here? Jane's mind raced for an explanation. I wanted to thank you for saving me from the snow. No one's ever done something like that for me before. Reese stared at her, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. It was nothing. No, Jane insisted, her voice breaking. It was everything. The air between them grew thick, charged. Jane's gaze dropped to his lips, and before she could stop herself, she leaned forward. Reese's hand shot out, stopping her. "What are you doing?" Humiliation flooded through her. I'm sorry,
Jane.
His voice was gentler now, but firm. "You work for me. This can't happen." Jane pulled back, her face burning. "I understand." But then Reese spoke again, his voice quiet. "Would you consider staying? As the children's nanny? Permanently?" Jane's heart stuttered. You want me to stay?" "The children need you," Reese said, his gaze intense. "And I think you need them too." Tears pricked Jane's eyes.
Yes.
"Yes, I'll stay." Reese's lips curved into a small, sad smile. "Good." But as Jane left his room, her heart heavy and hopeful all at once, she didn't see the ghost reappear in the shadows, its smile wider and more terrible than ever. 3 weeks later, Jane stood in a rundown bookstore in town, her desperation reaching its peak. The ghost was getting worse. It whispered to Reese constantly now, driving him to the brink. He'd grown distant again, his eyes hollow, his hands shaking. The children noticed. They asked Jane why their father wouldn't play with them anymore. And Jane had no answers. That's when she found the magician. He was sprawled on a too small couch in the back of the shop, his copper hair messy, his green eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. The moment Jane stepped through the door, the world shifted, the bright, modern store fading into something older, darker. "You must have a wish," the magician said without opening his eyes. Jane's breath caught. "How did you?" "Everyone who finds this place has a wish," he interrupted, sitting up slowly. "So, what is it? What are you desperate enough to trade everything for?" Jane swallowed hard. "There's a ghost. She's haunting someone I care about.
She won't let go.
I need her to find peace." The magician raised an eyebrow. "And if I grant this wish, I'll take what you love most. Are you sure that's a price you're willing to pay?" Jane thought of Reese, his rare smiles, the way he looked at his children, the warmth of his arms when he'd saved her from the snow. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm sure." The magician studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Done." Jane didn't remember much of the drive back. The magician had given her something, whiskey, he'd called it, though it tasted like magic and regret. By the time she stumbled into Hawthorne Hall, the world was spinning. And then she saw him. Reese was in the living room, and the moment their eyes met, Jane felt the pull, the overwhelming need to be close to him, to touch him, to tell him everything she'd been holding back. She crossed the room without thinking and climbed into his lap, her arms wrapping around his neck. "Jane," Reese said, his voice strained. "Have you been drinking?" "Maybe a little," she giggled, burying her face in his neck. "But I don't care. You feel so good." Reese's hands settled on her waist, firm but gentle. "Time for bed, darling." "Your bed?" Jane asked hopefully. "No," Reese said, though his voice was rough with restraint. He lifted her into his arms and carried her upstairs. By the time he laid her on her bed, Jane was half asleep, her inhibitions completely gone. "I was trying to forget," she mumbled as Reese pulled the blankets over her. "Forget what?" he asked softly. "You," Jane whispered. "How much I love you." Reese froze. Jane's eyes fluttered closed, and she didn't see the way his expression crumbled, pain and longing and something deeper flickering across his face. "I love you too," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "But you deserve better than what I can give you." The next morning, Jane woke to Reese standing in the corner of her room, his face pale and drawn. "We won't be needing your services anymore," he said, his voice flat. "I think it's best if you leave today." Jane's heart shattered.
What?
Why? You told me you love me, Reese said, not meeting her eyes. And I can't keep you here. It's a betrayal to Eliza, to everything we had. Reese, please. Pack your bags, he said coldly. I can't bear to look at you. Then he left. Jane sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. But through her grief, a terrible realization struck her.
The wish.
The magician's magic. Something had gone wrong. She had to fix this. Jane drove back to town, her hands shaking on the wheel. But as she rounded the final bend toward Hawthorne Hall to retrieve something she'd forgotten, she saw it. Smoke. The mansion was burning. Jane slammed on the brakes and ran, her heart pounding. Bill was outside with Sophie, both of them soot-streaked and terrified. Where's Reese? Jane screamed. Inside, Bill choked out. With Marcus. The boy, he started the fire. The ghost made him. Jane didn't wait to hear more. She ran into the burning house, the heat searing her skin. She found Marcus first, huddled in a corner, sobbing. I didn't want to, he cried. She made me. She said they were mates, that they had to be together forever. It's okay, Jane said, pulling him close. Where's Reese? Marcus pointed upward. The tower. Jane ran. The stairs were collapsing, flames everywhere, but she pushed through. And then she saw him. Reese was unconscious on the floor, the ghost hovering above him, her smile terrible and triumphant. Stop, Jane screamed. The ghost turned, and for the first time, Jane understood. Eliza wasn't haunting Reese out of love. She was haunting him out of rage. He let me die, the ghost hissed. He chose the children over me, over us. Because he's a father, Jane said, stepping forward. Because that's what love is. Sacrifice. The ghost's face twisted. Your mate is gone, Jane continued, her voice breaking. But his brother, Cliff, he's waiting for you. Let Reese go. Let him live. For a moment, the ghost hesitated. Then, slowly, it turned toward the shadows. And there, emerging from the smoke, was a massive wolf with kind eyes.
Cliff.
The ghost's expression crumbled. It reached out, wrapping its arms around the wolf, and together they vanished. Jane collapsed beside Reese, shaking him awake. Reese, please. His eyes opened. Jane, we have to go, she sobbed. But Reese's body was changing, shifting, and suddenly Jane was staring at a massive wolf with blue eyes. Understanding crashed over her. Shifter. He was a shifter. The wolf lowered itself, and Jane climbed on. Together, they leapt through the flames and into the night. 3 months later, the snow had melted, and spring had come to Hawthorne Hall. The mansion was being rebuilt, the West Wing finally laid to rest. And Jane had changed too. Bill's wish had worked. She was a shifter now, able to stand beside Reese as an equal, able to be his mate. She stood in the garden, watching as Reese played with the children, his laughter ringing through the air. Sophie was chasing butterflies, and Marcus was reading aloud from a book Jane had given him. Reese looked up and caught her eye. He smiled, a real, genuine smile, and held out his hand. Jane took it, letting him pull her close. I love you, he murmured against her hair. I love you too, Jane whispered back. And for the first time in her life, Jane wasn't alone. She had a family, a home, a future, and she had him. If you enjoyed this video, kindly subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comment section. Also, tap this video showing on your screen to see what happened in this werewolf fantasy story.